All right, 6.6 is multiplying polynomials. And so I put some rules up here. 2 rules I need you to know. The first one is if you're multiplying, you will multiply the numbers and you will add the exponents of the matching bases. So I did an example. The problem is 3x squared times 2x squared. I want you to see that I multiplied 3 times 2 and I got 6. I brought over the x squared times x squared. The bases match, so it's a multiplication problem, and I'm going to add my exponents. So x squared plus squared is 2 plus 2, so I got x to the 4th. So my final answer for this problem is 6x to the 4th. If you're adding and subtracting like we did in the last section, you have a problem like at the very bottom you see is 3x squared plus 2x squared. They are both x squareds, they are like terms. So I'm going to add 3 plus 2 and get 5 and bring over the x squared. The only time that you are getting a different label, like the x squared and the power, is if you're multiplying. If you're adding and subtracting, the label just comes straight over, okay? So you've got to keep those separate and straight in your mind. A really good idea would be to write these rules in an example on your note card so you can keep them straight. So let's look at some problems. Okay, it's a multiplication problem. We can rewrite this to look like this. All right, each piece is separated by a dot, they're all multiplied. These two are exactly the same. 3 times 5 is 15. These two, the bases are both x, so I'm going to take 1 plus 2 because this one's an understood x to the first power. Bases match, add the exponents. My final answer is 15x to the 3rd. Final answer. Okay, let's look at one where, well, let's go back to that one and let me talk about this answer. In my open math, it's a little bit tricky. And so this is the problem up here. This is the answer at the bottom that I circled. And here's what the instructions will say. So what they did here is they're telling you that the front number is going to be your C answer and your exponent P is going to be your P answer. So you come over here to your answer and you find your front number and that's your C, and so that's 15. And they want to know what your exponent is, and we see that our exponent's 3, and so 3 is going to be our answer for that. So they really just make that look a whole lot harder than really what it is, okay? So please don't get too off track with that one. Okay, let's look at a distribution problem. Okay, this 3x to the 3rd is outside of the parentheses. There is no add or subtract sign between that term and the parentheses, which means it's going to be multiplied in times every piece or every term inside. Some of you tried to do this earlier and you were only multiplying it times the first term, okay? And you were getting your problems wrong on your last unit test. This 3 goes to everything, all 3 terms inside. So what am I dealing with? I'm multiplying 3x to the 3rd times 5x squared. I'm also multiplying 3x to the 3rd times negative 1x. And I'm multiplying 3x to the 3rd times a negative 4. So I want you to see that this times this, and this times this, and this times this. I wrote those out. So here's what we've got. 3 times 5 is 15. X to the 3rd, x squared, bases match, add the exponents, and I get 15x to the 5th. Okay. The next problem, I have 3 times a negative 1, which is a negative 3. I have x to the 3rd plus 1 equals negative 3x to the 4th. The very last one, I have a multiplication problem. Signs are different. The answer is always negative, so I get a negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. There is no other x's for this one to go with, so it just gets brought over, and so this ends up being negative 12x to the 3rd. if at any time any of these three match, meaning x to the fifth and another x to the fifth, meaning they're the same labels or like terms, I would put them together, okay? But I look at these and I see x to the fifth, x to the fourth, x to the third. None of them match, so they're all going to be a part of my final answer, and I write them in descending order, so biggest to smallest. Here's my final answer for this problem. Okay. All right, let's look at one that doesn't quite look like something we've talked about before. All right, two parentheses, and there's two terms in each parenthesis. So here's my first term, second term, first term, second term, okay? This is different than what we've had in the past. We've had one parenthesis with several things and only one term outside. How do I know there's only one term outside? Because there's no add and subtract signs that separate it. So when I'm looking at these two terms here, I need to make sure that I know what I'm doing. And the way that we solve this, we call this foiling, okay? So I'm going to write it out, F, O, I, and L. So for this first one, I want you to realize I will always write F-O-I-L out, and I will write out the problem, and then I will solve it. Not just for you, but for me. I do this to solve even when I'm not trying to show you an example. I have to write it because I have to keep track of signs and numbers and variables, and if I don't write it out, I lose something, okay? So, but I am going to write out what they stand for. I don't always do that, and I don't need to do that for myself anymore, but I will do that for right now to start. So F refers to the first terms. O refers to the outer. I refers to the inner terms. And L refers to the last terms. So what are we talking about? Well, let's look at the problem. My first two terms are x and 3x, right? The first one of this piece, the parenthesis, and the first one of this parenthesis. So that's where I got those two, okay? I'm going to multiply. Everything is multiplication, okay? So each one of these, you're going to multiply the two things that you come up with. So I have nothing to multiply by the 3. X and x is x to the first plus 1, so I end up with 3x squared as my final answer for this one, right? Bases match, add the exponents, that's where I got x squared. The next piece talks about your outer terms. When I look at this problem at the very top, the outside two pieces would be this one and this one. So those numbers are x times a positive 2, and I end up with 2x. Okay, 2 and x touch, they just smash together. The rule is that the number comes first and the letter follows, so that's where I got 2x from. The I is for your inner two terms, inside, which are these two, okay? So I'm going to have a negative 2. Remember that the sign in front of it goes with it, so a negative 2 times a 3x. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6, bring the x, so I get negative 6x. The last terms are these two guys. A negative 2 times a 2. A negative and a positive multiplied together gives me a negative. 2 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to rewrite this in descending order. 3x squared plus 2x minus 6x minus 4. I ask myself, do any of these match? Are they like terms? And I say yes, of course, this one and this one. I know that I'm adding and subtracting now, so that means that I'm going to bring my label down for my answer and look at the numbers together. 2 minus 6, I change it to an addition problem and change the sign of the one that follows. I now see that signs are not the same, so I'm going to subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. So these two combine to give me negative 4x. So I don't have anything else that matches, so I bring down everything and put it in descending order, and I end up with 3x squared minus 4x minus 4 as my final answer. So I can see here that these two match. I want to give you a little tip. They will not always match because we will get into harder things in pre-college algebra 2, but the majority of the time, hold on. but the majority of the time they will match. So you're looking for being able to add or subtract these two middle terms. When you're going to put them together, you are not going to be changing their letter variable. You're just going to bring the letter down to the final answer and combine the numbers. All right, let's look at another foiling problem. I will not write first, outer, inner, and last on this next problem, but I will write the FOIL to keep us on track. So this next problem is 2x plus 1 times 3x minus 4. Okay, before we get started on this one, how do I know that I'm going to FOIL and I'm not just going to add things together? Well, I want you to see that between these two parentheses, there is nothing. Okay, that means that they are multiplied together. In the earlier sections, you would see a problem that looked like this. And this guy right here would tell you to distribute this to the ones that follow and then put together things that match, right? So this problem, if we added this, would be 5x minus 3. Because I put the 2x and the 3x together, brought the x down, added 1 and negative 4, signs are different, subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. So this would be my answer if I was adding, okay? I would do that because of this guy right here, okay? If we don't see that, like we don't in the problem that we have at the very top, you need to realize that we are going to FOIL. How do I know I'm FOILing? Well, because there's 2 terms times 2 terms. That means FOIL. So here's our FOIL format. Make sure that you're taking the sign in front of it to do this. My first 2 terms are 2x times 3x. My outside 2 terms are 2x times a negative 4. My inside 2 terms are 1 times 3x. And my last 2 terms are 1 times a negative 4. Biggest mistake is that you do not take the sign that's in front of them. People forget about that negative on that 4, okay? If you don't hang on to it, you will miss the problem. All right, so we're multiplying. I start with the f, 2x times 3x, 2 times 3 is 6, x to the first plus 1, right? 1 and 1. It's a multiplication problem. Bring the base over, add the exponents. 6x squared is what I got for that first one. My outer terms, signs are different. The answer is negative. 4 times 2 is 8. Bring over the x. The inner 2 terms, 3 times 1 is 3. Bring the x over. You can see here that these are both x's, so I know later I'm going to add them together or combine them together and have an x as an answer with a number in front of it. And the last one, 1 times negative 4 is negative 4. So when I combine these two, here's what I have. Negative 8 plus 3. Signs are different. Subtract and take the sign of the bigger number. So these are gone, and now this is what I have. So I have 6x squared minus 5x minus 4. It's in descending order, x squared, x, and then just a number. None of those match, so this is my final answer. All right, that's all that we have for section 6.6. Make sure that you do your TOYOs and ask me questions when you have them.